Today on Leading Women. Every morning, Bea Valdes wakes up a couple of hours before the rest of the household does to find some time for herself, to practice yoga, and to try to catch some of the dreams she had the night before. As an accessories designer, she experiments with patterns and the play of stones in her head, even before any needle meets thread or any bead is bedded. Bea Valdes, who has brought Philippine embroidery and beading to a new level of global luxury with her bags and jewelry, doesn't just stay ahead of the curve, she creates it.
Welcome to Leading Women, Bea.
Thank you for having me.
Bea, were you creative as a child? Would you like to draw, paint?
Yes, I was actually. Ever since I was very little, I always used to draw, and my mother was very encouraging of it. And I think my brother and my two sisters are also creative in different ways. So we were nurtured to explore and really do as much as we can with that. I was always drawing and painting, and in a way, if you think about it, I always say I was designing at a very young age, because one of the pictures that my mom framed when I was in preschool, it was called Toys for the Ghost.
Toys for the Ghost?
If you think about it, it's designing objects actually for a particular individual. So it was already with that mindset. So yeah.
Do you remember where you got those ideas from, or did you see it around?
Well, my father's side of the family is also very artistic, and I think maybe that trickled down to us as well.
And as a child, you mentioned that your brother and your sisters were also very creative.
Yes.
What was your home like? Give us an idea of a little bit of your childhood.
Well, we were lucky enough. We grew up with a garden, so we were always playing in the garden. I was actually reading quite a lot, but it was very active. I think it was a lot of playing and experimenting with whatever we had at hand. I don't think we actually had a lot of toys, and we didn't actually watch a lot of television. So it was more an experience of being outdoors and using your imagination.
Bea has always been heralded as a style icon, and coupled with her artistic talent, she's a much sought-after subject of society and fashion magazines.
You're in the international magazines. Famous personalities such as Christy Turlington, Kate Hudson, even Kate Moss have a Bea Valdes.
Or at least they wore one in a shoot.
Yes.
So.
How do you feel about that?
It's quite amazing, actually. I think, especially when you think about how we started and where we come from, and it's very insulated in a way. So it's really quite astounding or wonderful to be able to have that platform and have our things showcased that way.
Did you start with a bag first, or a neck piece first, or a bracelet?
Well, how we started initially, the whole thing was they were bags first, I think. And before they were bags, they were actually just panels. And my mother said, you have to do something with this, either cushions or bags. And it was actually that simple. And we started with the bags, and the necklaces evolved. Because a friend of mine had said, well, we'd like to shoot you and wear something that you've made, but don't wear normal jewelry, make something. And that's how it started. And that actually caused quite a revolution also in the way we do things.
With her brand Bea Valdes, Bea makes it clear that it's not only about her. Their success is a team effort, and her family has everything to do with it.
Did you really envision your workshop to be like this?
I think we had an idea, or maybe a dream of it to be like this. We wanted a space where it was open, there was a lot of ventilation and natural light. We wanted, since we spent so much time here, we wanted it to be like an open canvas that was really inspirational. So,
Tell us about that dream and how you got to this workshop.
well, one of the things we really wanted when we were going to create a space was a space that showed a different side of manufacturing. I think for the things that we do, you often hear stories about maybe less than ideal situations for making and crafting things, and we really wanted to change that idea. It's something that we've been able to achieve with everybody's work here behind, and my mother and my sister, who I work very closely with. So I think it's collectively maybe the energy we all have and the effort we've all put into it. And the thing is, the brand is called Bea Valdes, which then sort of puts all the focus on me. But if you think about it, it's not just a team or a workshop, it's really a community that we have that's really been putting this idea of craft and Philippine embroidery forward.
Why Philippine embroidery? Were you exposed to like local materials when you were young, or did you have a certain interest in
Embroidery?
embroidery? Yes.
I think I was talking to my sister the other day, and I said it starts with it was the lament over a tablecloth, because my Lola had this amazing 14-seater tablecloth, and you could see it was fully embroidered. And my mother would tell me you had to have like a group of women sit together for months trying to finish this one piece. And I would always say, how come nobody does this work, or why can't you see more of it? And I think it really started with that interest of the spirit that it took to make this, to work together. And it's part of our heritage as well. So I just wanted to explore where that story was going. It wasn't so much an evolution, or as much as it was something that was always there. I mean, I was always drawing, always designing from grade school. I remember first grade, we had a Halloween party and I had to design my costume. So it was not something that was unusual, it was just something that was always there.
How does Marga come into the picture, your sister who works with you?
Yes, actually, she's integral part with my mother as well, because they are basically the backbone of this. They are the driving force, because as much as I can design, it goes nowhere without their vision of where to go. So I think mine is really about details, and theirs is the bigger picture.
Can you describe the kind of relationship you have? Because you have a working relationship, at the same time your family.
It's basically the same. I don't think there's really much separation, which means it's friendly, it's honest, and it's authentic. And we share the same vision and the same ethics. So I think it's an ideal situation.
And your how do you call them? The beaders,
The
beaders. How much participation do they have in that group effort?
Well, it's all their hands, and I think it's a testament to their technical skill. I mean, it's they've evolved also so much from the beginning, and it's actually so much easier to work now because everybody seems to be on the same page.
How do you feel when you see your designs? How do you feel when you see the finished product?
It's quite flattering, and it's also quite rewarding, but it's a group effort. So I mean, it's like most of the time when we finish it, it's not just me looking at it, it's a group of people looking at it and saying, yes, that was quite good, it's good we changed this and everything. So it's a very collaborative effort.
Aside from her family, Bea works with a group of beaders and embroiderers, all women, who comprise the technical skill and labor of the operation. With their hands, they help translate Bea's vision into tactile pieces of wearable art.
Most of the ladies here are also mothers, so it's very nice to have this environment where we can build on our strengths as mothers and take it and use it in our work. My first child, actually, I had the luxury of bringing her every day here and working, with her like in a Bjorn attached to me.
You remember hanging out with your mom as well as a little girl? And
actually, yes, my mother used to work and we used to visit her at the office quite often, and she also had a mother who worked. So I think we come from a family where that wasn't very foreign, and it was almost, it's something you're used to, and when I was small, I couldn't wait to get to a point where I would be working as
Okay.
well. So.
The first piece you ever made. Tell us about that.
I have the first panel we've made with Manang Karina, who's our #1 beater.
Okay.
And it was quite funny because we really had to draw it one by one, and we both didn't know the technique to do it. So it was a slow process that took maybe a month to make a panel this big, but it's a starting point, and then you go from there.
What was the challenge, or what were the challenges in creating your first few pieces?
I think it was just because we weren't familiar with the language of needle and thread, because it does have the way that you should use it. There's a way to pull and to knot and to do everything so that it's in line. And then after a while, when you're good with that, then it's how to make it fluid. So, and as we move along, then it's how to put metal on a curve. So there's always new challenges on how to do it, which is good because I think experimenting moves the whole discipline forward. So we're always problem solving and experimenting.
And women are very good at problem solving.
I think so. And I think one of the things when we first started, even with the ladies here, I would always tell them you have to have a certain sense of what Filipinos call alaga when you do something, which is care.
Yeah.
Because you can't just do something. In order for it to have a life, a real life of its own, you have to do it with care.
You're talking about alaga. You're
Yes.
talking about care. So how do you care for, let's start with the human factor first. How do you care for your beaders and all your workers here in the shop?
One of the things is everybody has their strengths. Not everybody can craft the same way. So I think you play to their strengths, but at the same time, there has to be a flow. You have to know how to do a little bit of everything. And I think the alaga would come in trying to nurture what they're good at and then to really help them out for things. Or actually, more than me, you find teams or groups that can really help and work with each other. So strengths to weaknesses.
Bea's educational background is in industrial design rather than fashion, and this has influenced the way she creates. She approaches designing from the perspective of problem solving, but the process is still very organic, if not unconventional.
You daydream of your designs? Where do these designs come from? This is just one of the many beautiful pieces you have.
Well, yeah, I think you have to use your imagination because even you can't experiment with every single piece. So what I do is I might build it in my head and then try and see what it's like because I don't draw very much, at least not for these designs because I think they're really tactile and the 3D aspect of it, the nature of a bead, how the crystal might look next to the stone, you can't render that. So I think it's very experimental, it's very organic. But the initial stage is always up in my head.
We were talking about the design process.
Yes.
In my mind, I think when you put materials together and you see it and you're like, okay, this is it.
No.
Does it work that way?
No, not at all. Well, the process is very organic. I mean, I might have the idea vaguely, for example, for this one of a knot. But then in order to execute it, I would have to find the perfect stone that would complement the blue. And sometimes we might find material that's relevant, but I got it 3 years ago. So it's really about trying to mix and match the perfect combination. And it takes a lot of trial and error.
And you speak of stories. I understand that there's an interesting story about your instructor who correct me if I'm wrong, mentioned that you'd only be good at making coffee. What was the situation and what a comment?
Well, it was basically that was in interior design, and how the process of interior design is basically you have a plan and then you do the elevations, which is the side view of the space, and from there then you do a perspective of a space. And since I could see the space first, it was always easier for me to do a perspective first.
Okay.
And then do the side elevations and do the plan. So it was really backwards. But for me, I could see the effect from the finished product more than doing it spatially. And I think it was very upsetting for her to have one student was doing the whole process upside down. So that's why she said no one would hire me. So.
What happened after that?
She actually helped me get my first
Sweet.
job.
Oh.
So it does work out, I think, in the end. So
And the challenge, I mean, how did you feel? Did it...
it was, at the time, it was very upsetting. It was because you work very hard on it, even though your process might not be like everybody else's. But my mother, who I called right after that, was able to help me focus on what was most important at the time, which is the work. And she said, which is also dealing with people who might not have the same opinions. So I think I've been lucky because I've been surrounded by people who constantly remind us of our strengths, or that it's about working with other people in the end.
You mentioned your designs are very unconventional. Till this very minute, are they still unconventional?
I think the process remains organic. I think unconventional only because I think I always look at the material and imagine it doing something else, or whether I can try to make it look or mimic a certain curve. So I think that's where the look would come from, or that characteristic. But yes, and it hasn't really changed from
When Bea first turned her designs into a business, she wrote out a mission statement to bring Philippine embroidery and beading to a global audience. Her pieces have been regularly showcased in international magazines like Vogue, Elle, Bazaar, the Paris Accessories Fair, and on the red carpet runway. Now, she's bringing her craft to the public for a wider audience to see right here in Manila.
What else is in the pipeline for Bea Valdes?
Well, I think one of the things that we had been discussing for a while, my sister and I, was that to bring the embroidery to sort of a wider scale so that more people can appreciate it. And we've been lucky enough to have, I suppose, a more public project. We've been able to create a few art pieces that will be seen. So at least that way we get to showcase it in a larger scale.
Okay.
And
These pieces will be seen locally?
Yes, they'll be at the Shangri-La at the fort. So,
okay.
We've been working with them, and
Nice.
it's very fascinating for us because it was about, they wanted an embroidered panel. So for us to reinterpret that as an artwork in a large scale for the
Yes.
public, it's a wonderful challenge.
What else is important to you, Bea, aside from all of this?
Well, actually, I guess I'm lucky enough to have everything that's important already with me. And I think it's just really building and appreciating all of that. As you said, my family, my work, the lifestyle, I'm very happy with it. And it's different because it's a constant concentration, especially when you're working with a needle. You have to. And I think it involves a lot of skill and a lot of time that you have to harvest and put back into the next piece. And I think for people to start working again with their hands and rediscovering this whole applied arts is very important for us as well. So.
I'm listening to you and I have no creative or artistic bone in my system whatsoever, but listening to you, I get so inspired to try to put things together and to try to come up with all these things in my mind.
I think everybody has a bit of or a lot of creativity in them. It's really just being unafraid to experiment and to make mistakes and to try different things. Because even with us here, the whole day is spent, making things, making a mistake, rectifying, changing, and it's just a constant thing.
Bea Valdes is an artist who sees the world in a different way. Through the hushed language of needle and thread, her designs outline the timelessness and ingenuity of Philippine embroidery. From her days as the classic It Girl to her new life now as a working mother, she has always infused her surroundings with a unique style that is as deliberate as it is effortless. To have a bag or a piece of jewelry made by Bea Valdes is to take part in a creative vision with Filipino design and craftsmanship at its heart.